What's going on, everybody? Today is September 8th. It is Aloha Friday, and you are listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. Welcome, everybody. We'll have everybody here just in a second. As you can see, we are getting closer and closer to a full commitment of Aloha shirts. But to be fair, we know it's cold over in Perth, Australia. So Aaron is in wintertime. Although, we'll try to work on maybe getting that Daily AI Show Aloha hoodie for you, Aaron. That'll be the jump off of our future merch for merch.
We're going to do a Kickstarter campaign for Carl and Aaron. It's going to be a Hawaiian shirt, donations.
That'd be Carl fantastic. Looks like he may have like a flower, almost kind of. So we'll call it. We'll count it. Hey, today we're talking about whose data is it anyway? And that's a little play on Whose Line Is It Anyway, the famous improv show that used to be on, I think it was Comedy Central for years.
It's still on.
Still on, is it?
Yeah.
I'm back in the Wayne Brady days and people like that when he used to do that stuff.
It's still on there. They just have a different host now.
Do they really? Okay, well, there you go. Didn't realize that show's still running, which means it's been going for like 15, 20 years, I think.
It's awesome, yeah.
We're talking about the AI and the battle for data ownership. So, things like the training dilemmas and, what's the broader landscape of data and how should businesses go about trying to figure out who owns this? What do I, if I do this, if I put this in ChatGPT, if I create a chatbot or whatever, who owns this data and do I have to be worried about it? So that's sort of the topic for today. If anybody wants to jump in as always and has a first hot take, that would be fantastic.
Deathly silence for the first time.
Well, there's a lot of ways we can go with this for sure. I think when I think about how we've been helping our clients, and I work for Scale, so it's a consulting agency. This does come up quite a bit, which is like, hey, Brian, we really want to use these AI. Typically, it's going to be prompt engineering and stuff like that for sales. But we're fearful of when we input our information and we're doing these role playing and things like that, how much of that is really getting trained into the data for like ChatGPT? Do we need to be worried about that? And oftentimes my answer is, number one, it's Rachel who says, don't put anything in there that you wouldn't post anonymously on Reddit. That's usually her take on this. So I think that's a great start. And I think people should be careful about putting highly sensitive data, or any sensitive data, not even highly, into tools like ChatGPT, because the fact of the matter is we know on that side of the house, they are training on the data. Now you can turn that off.
Let's talk about that. So you took the pivot on this topic being, let's talk about the chatbot language models use of data. So let's go ahead and jump down that. Let's jump down that rabbit trail a little bit. So talking about training. Now this is something that I've been battling with for months as far as the process. Even this morning I was asking ChatGPT to explain the process more to me. But what I'm getting at is, if Jinmi and Brian are in ChatGPT right now, and they're plugging away all this IP, they're asking, they're putting their company's IP in there, asking questions, they're uploading a document, this, that, and the other, right? Yes, ChatGPT is training on that data. But if I were to log into the system and specifically ask about Brian's company, and I know, I'm his competitor, I want to ask a question about what is that secret sauce he uses for his widget, it's not going to be in that same instance. Like I don't know. I'm just claiming this to be true. It seems as though even though it's training on it, I'm not going to have access to that information that you're sharing, mainly because it's training on just like all language models, on the relationship, the semantic relationships of the data and the pattern recognition, the patterns of the words and what's going on. It might know Brian is associated with the widget is associated for XYZ company. It might have those pieces, but it's not going. There's not going to be a data point. It's not going to be a zeros and ones on a hard drive somewhere in OpenAI's landscape that is going to be like, I want to access that data. I want the secret sauce for that widget. And so that's my only, I guess what I'm trying to figure out, because if it was the case, then I would be able to jump on right now and start querying stuff that you've been saying on your instance with ChatGPT, but which you can't do.
Here's my pushback on that, Robert.
Okay, tell me.
So, ChatGPT has been trained on voluminous documents, and somehow it accumulates specific facts and specific history up through the end of 2021. It knows a lot, and those things are, if the prompt is formed correctly, those are retrievable somehow in that system. If indeed you submit a document and ChatGPT, or I should say OpenAI, uses that to further train the model, which I think is very unlikely. I think the volume of stuff that's being uploaded to that is not being incorporated into their training, which is going to be at this stage, it's going to be focused on much different sources of data than what's being offered up by the users. But if they did use your specific document, I'm not sure that a red team couldn't go in and try to piece together data that's specific to that company document.
Well, the problem is with that is I would agree partially, but right now it's still 2021. There's still a cutoff. So whatever, if they are training on it, it'll be 4.5. It'll be whatever. So I agree that they probably could, red team could access it, but not the current instance, because there's difference between, I mean, unless you're talking about inference. If you're talking about inference, then you're basically talking about fine tuning. So what I'm trying to say is 4.0 is 2021, but if they're using existing data to train it to then fine tune their existing GPT-4, then yes, it might be accessible through inference, but not the language model itself.
So the question that comes to mind for me is, I can't imagine that OpenAI are that stupid enough that they would say, let's just take everything everyone gives us and make it available to everybody. Now, I'm not saying they're not maybe doing it a little bit, but I just can't imagine that in the the legal happy world of corporate business and that sort of stuff, that they're going to leave themselves open to too many opportunities to be sued for that. And so I don't know. I'm not convinced that they're taking everybody's secret source and private info and making it available for other people to pull out. Now, if you wrote the perfect quote, you might get some piece of information, but I'm not personally convinced that they're doing that, because at the end of the day, that's just going to make them look bad. That they spend all this time and money building a position in the market, and to then fall down on the spot by doing something stupid just doesn't seem very sensible.
You're definitely right, but I don't know how they prevent it. Like, if they're going to train on it, how do they prevent Coca-Cola's recipe from getting out? I don't know. Like, I agree that it'd be stupid for them to let it happen, but they're going to have some protections in place that, but I don't know how they could.
Here's another layer of protection, which is when you prepare data for a training run, in many cases, what you'll want to do is remove any personally identifiable information. You'll have an AI run through that document, and they're looking for the semantics of it more than the facts of it. And so it doesn't hurt in the context of training to replace specific names like Scaled Consulting with consulting firm. And I think that's probably the way training sets are being developed.
That's a hope. That's a hope for sure.
And I know we sort of started here with just talking, we sort of zoomed right into OpenAI, but it's important to remember that there's many, many language models out there. We tend to talk about ChatGPT quite a bit. Claude specifically, aka Anthropic, who creates it, does not train on data inside their user prompts, because their model is built completely different. And so they don't do that. In fact, they have, you look at their web, I'm looking at their websites now, because people are asking about Claude Pro, which was just announced yesterday, the day before. And people are like, hey, is my information safe on Claude Pro? Their answer is, by default, and just like our beta version of Claude.ai, we will not use your prompts and conversations for Claude Pro to train our models. There are two instances in which we may use your prompts. One is if you give us explicit permission by giving feedback with thumbs up or thumbs down. The second one is when you use prompts and conversations are flagged for trust and safety review. Then they may come up and be reviewed that way. But Claude is basically saying, we do not, that's not the way our model is trained. And this has been something from day one with Anthropic that's made them different than like a ChatGPT, which is absolutely using or relying on human feedback to make the systems better. What I find interesting, and I can share it on the screen if you like, but it basically, when you look at the enterprise version of ChatGPT that's coming out, their page is peppered with privacy. So it's interesting that OpenAI has felt like they need to come over the top with their new enterprise version to come over and say like, hey, there's even more here with privacy. So like we do not train on your business data, and our models do not learn on your usage. You own your inputs and outputs where allowed by law. You control how long your data is retained in ChatGPT. We've been audited for SOC2 compliance, data encryption at rest and TLS 1.2, all that stuff. So there's a whole page here called open.ai. In fact, I'll just put it in, but it's like their enterprise privacy statement. So I just find it interesting, and maybe something to talk about, that they're going above and beyond for their enterprise to let people know, hey, this is safe for your business to use in the future.
Let me give you a cynical take on that. And this is the marketer in me speaking as well. It could be that they always did have all of this privacy stuff in place. They just didn't talk about it so that they could amp up the promotional factor of, once we sell you Enterprise Edition for X number, $100 or $1,000 a month, we'll give you all the privacy stuff, but we're not telling you it's actually already in the base platform anyway.
Interesting take.
I want to shift just slightly. There was a point made on the Marketing AI show a couple weeks back that I think is adjacent to this. So we talk about the big players and their large language models, and like, what are they doing with your data? There are smaller, not as big as this, companies who have tons of data on us before we even thought about this. Sure. Right? There is not a policy about whether they can use my data to train the large language model, because that was not a question. And so the comment on the show that Paul Ratzer was making was, how do you make that decision, right? The ethical decision is to not do it, of course. But the business decision is perhaps
the ethical
not
decision
to use data that I was not explicitly given permission to in a case that was not in anyone's awareness at that time. In a use case, not a legal case.
So we could test this theory by starting to feed some bogus data in, and then see if I feed it in and one of you guys start searching for it, and vice versa. You never know we could find something interesting in that department. I
would think it'd be very rare for that to come up. I really do. I kind of agree with Robert on this one, as far as like there's to Andy's point, there's no harm in being safer. There's no harm in swapping out a company name for a alias, or a person for a persona. I can say I need to train on the VP of sales, and I need to understand their typical objections as it relates, blah, 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 blah. That's all sort of basic data. The minute I get in there and I start saying my client is such and such, and I want to learn more about such and such, which we deal with in sales all the time, that's where it can be a little bit different. I also think it's important, though, to remember that you can, in fact, turn this off inside of ChatGPT, at least on that tool. And so it's something to remember, that you can explicitly say, do not use any information. Now, you lose some features and functionality to go along with that, but you do have that choice. And so I think that's important to remember as well.
Brian, a couple of sessions ago, you made a good point that data is the new gold rush. I'm not sure which session that was, which, everybody on this call will agree it is. So let's kind of take what we just talked about. Let's talk about the fact that the best use of GPT or any of these language models or any of these AI tools is really going to depend. How effective they are is going to be completely dependent on the data you're using, right? So if you're trying to do something for your company, it's garbage in, garbage out. So we already talked about that on another podcast. But the reason I'm bringing it up now again is because if we're talking about it as a new oil, it's a new gold rush or whatever, what in that context, and we're talking about ownership, we're going to have to talk about the output as well. So we talk about garbage in. We're talking about the fact that we're going to have lots of people who have really good access to data, Google, for example, they're going to be able to do a lot with it. If a company is really good about, collecting customer data, they're going to be able to do more with it. So at this point, who owns the data on the input side is going to be important, because those large firms are already been in the data collection world for a while, or companies are really good about keeping their, the stuff that was already bought and sold. You and I and everybody here is bought and sold constantly, many times a day, all of our data to help, other companies do stuff. But I'm rambling. But my point is going back to the output part. So we understand that that's input but what about the output? Who's going to own the results of some of this stuff? Because it's not really proprietary. You can't claim ownership if you're using a language model right now. You can't, copyright wise, to that output. So can we shift to the battle for data ownership from the output perspective? How do we kind of protect that? And can we protect the output?
Well, I can tell you that, because this just literally came up with my company. I can't give the specifics on it, but what I can tell you is that we were putting together high level training in AI, essentially. And one of the things that came back from the company that we were doing this for and working in conjunction with was, they said point blank to something I had actually created. And they said, did this description come out of ChatGPT? And I said, yes, it did, because it was a summary of something else. And I literally did use ChatGPT, and they called it out, and they said, we can't use that because it can't be ours if it's ChatGPT's. And so that company was like, no problem. We're going to tweak this to make it our words. So they were using ChatGPT and just twisting it a bit, paraphrasing as opposed to quote unquote, copy pasting. And for them, that was an okay workaround. But this literally came up in the last 48 hours.
That's great. I'm wondering if the Copyright Office would agree with that, or lawyers would agree with that method. Because if you're a plagiarist, that if you're reading a book and then you're reading cliff notes for assignment in school, and you just basically reworded this sentence, now it's yours. But the original source was, a cliff notes. I wonder if they'll accept the original source being AI, and you just rephrase their rephrase. I would love that to be the case, because then we could copyright everything we do just by putting a human spin on it.
I mean, if I use ChatGPT and I use it to do a world of research, and then in my brain I go, that makes me have these ideas, and then I conceptualize that, and now this is my point. How is that different than me reading 10
exactly? Yeah, I think
articles?
I think it becomes an issue of fair use, and I'm curious, Junmia, what you think about AI generated art and music, and whether by doing a modification of that, doesn't it become a fair use of whatever that was, and it becomes ultimately protectable when you publish it as a modified version of whatever the source art was?
Well, that's actually the real question, right? It's and that's what's in the debate right now. So if you've been following, and I know we covered it in a previous show, the Copyright Office doing that general inquiry, it's because they need input on that process, because what they haven't defined yet is where does interpretation, where does inspiration, at what point, like you said, Brian and Robert, what point does it become I absorbed it, then I added my expression to it, or I changed it with my expression, and then created a new piece. Right now, it's just clear, taking something from that generative AI product and putting it into your own things doesn't cut it. That's what they're super clear on right now. Prompts don't cut it. Taking it and putting into your own work doesn't cut it.
We have a comment from our viewer, Mr.
William's on. Perfect. I love this guy. If you were part of the AIX, he had a fantastic workshop. He lays it out real clear what the law interpretation is and that information he gives. So yes, if you want to know absolutely what's going on, the newest thing about copyright law, fair use, all of that, go follow William.
Sorry. well, other than that gushing review there,
member of the crew.
he makes a good point about qualitative contribution by the author. I think that's a good litmus test, Brian, to what we were just talking about and what Jimmy just mentioned. So good point. Thank you, William.
And part of that is I'm a tech consultant, but I think like an artist, right? I have an artist background. The more original your thought is, I have ChatGPT ask me questions, and then we work with my original concept. That's always been true, right? If you're using something to help you counterfeit somebody else's idea, that's always bad. And if it's a really common thing where, it's like a consultant agreement, right? So the probability that most consultant agreements seem sort of similar, right? They have a similar pattern, they have similar language. That's sort of boilerplate. But I think maybe a little less trying to figure out how to get around the system and reword, and maybe more like having original thoughts. Sorry. Go ahead, push back. Why is that bad shit?
I guess my thing there, though, Beth, is and this gets into the philosophical side of it, and maybe William has a better answer for this, because I'm certainly no lawyer. But there's an argument for saying I haven't had an original thought in my brain ever. That everything has been somehow shaped, formatted. Last night my daughter was having trouble going to sleep, so I was up later and I was watching old Jimmy Buffett interviews from Bob Costas in 1991, because depending on when you watch or listen to this episode, Jimmy Buffett had passed away a couple days ago. And so I was reminiscing and just listening to him talk about it. He's talking about how, the James Taylors, the Gordon Lightfoots, all these people were massive inspirations to him. And Jimmy Buffett would be the first to say, I write basic songs. I'm not trying to be bigger or more heady than this. It's all about just being lighthearted and having fun. And these are my inspirations when I was on the streets in New Orleans and stuff like that. And I don't know. We see this all the time. And we've talked about the Ed Sheeran thing about trying to copyright a song that was using the most common chords in guitar, GCD, and how he's saying you can't do that. At the end of the day, I'm still putting my original ideas, my thoughts on top of this overly, overused or very, very common structure. So it is hard for me. And we may have more comments on this.
I've seen this phrase a lot in the marketing world, and it's used something, I'm not quoting it perfectly, but something like there's little or no original thought in the space. Everything I know about marketing, I've learned from somebody else.
Yeah.
Either a book I read or a course I took, and then mixed in with that is my personal experience with doing stuff. But largely everything in there has come from someone else. If I sat down and wrote a book on some topic in marketing, it would be drawing from all the stuff I've learned in the last 18 and a half years. So it's hardly original thought as such.
But what's original what's original? What I'm talking about is original is the flavor that you put on it, right?
Yeah.
But there's nothing under the sun. Yeah. That's kind of my thought process. I'm under the impression you don't own an idea, you don't own a thought. It's like my favorite sketch show on Comedy Central, I Think You Should Leave. There's one sketch where this guy's mad because one of these other guys in this acting troupe does his lines before he can. He stole my line because he did it faster. Well, you got to do faster. You can be faster than I'm faster than you. That's why I'm doing your line, because I'm faster. So I'm some of me thinks it's not the idea. It's who can actually better encapsulate it and sell it. Yeah. But that's not copyright law. That's just,
taking to your point, Robert, it's more about okay, which one do you prefer? The Office UK or The Office America? It's two different flavors. Pretty much the exact same thing. But imagine if, no, I think they'd probably get sued if they did it without, permissions. But if I just sat in a room and looked at Picasso art for 3 months straight, just consumed it all, and I painted something of my, someone asked me to paint something, wouldn't you think if that's all I knew for 3 months, I would paint something very, very similar to Picasso, probably, because that's all I've been consuming for the past month. Now, 1,000 times that in less than, I don't know, 1 minute, that to me is what AI does. It just consumes everything. So how is that different than me learning it? It's doing it at infinitesimal speed than I can. So I was like, how do you...
Yeah, in that context, Midjourney is your paintbrush.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a tool you use to generate. Now, obviously, you're using the corpus of knowledge of Picasso embedded in Midjourney, not embedded in you. But you knew Picasso. You knew that you wanted to look like Picasso, so you used a tool that produced Picasso really well. Is that plagiarism? I don't know. That's a
copyright question.
I'll pull this up because I was curious based on Williams real quick on his comment about, it's different. Originality is different in copyright. So I just thought I would go look for that really quick. Now, this is from a site called Virtuoso Legal, so I can't validate that that's 100% correct. But I think this last sentence about this means that the work is not copied or compromised from another pre-existing work. So the question there is that something coming out of ChatGPT, is that pre-existing work? Because it was created by AI.
What is compromised? Too, like, what is the definition of compromised?
Right. The word was comprised, not
comprised. Okay.
Thank you, Andy. I read that wrong.
So in case it's not massively obvious, none of us are IP attorneys. And if you have questions about this subject, you should totally consult your personal IP attorney.
Yeah. At no time should anybody looking at any of us as attorneys on the show.
I wouldn't call this IP. I would just call this the difficulty that Copyright Office and everybody is battling with, whether you're going to be able to use these models in the future because they're getting thrown against the courts. B, the stuff you generate, can you put a copyright claim on that even though you spent a lot of time trying to create, maybe it's an operation, maybe it's a cool product that you created using these models. Can you protect yourself and your, to make money off that? Those are questions.
So there's two things here. Number one, it's possible in the future copyright as we know it will go away. I think that may happen to some extent. Number two, particularly for people who are watching who are maybe still a little bit new to the whole AI and large language models and all that kind of stuff. This is kind of the difference between Google and something like ChatGPT is Google can find the information and feed back pointers to it. ChatGPT can consume it, understand it, and give you an amalgam, for want of a better word, about what it is you're asking. So that's a really big difference. And I don't know if a lot of people have sort of thought about the implications of that. This is where Google search engines, as we know it, are probably going away largely in the next few years, I think.
Yep.
Okay. So let's wrap it up. TLDR. What's the what can businesses do? What's one thing businesses can do? I open it up to the floor. Go.
Verify first that that whatever implementations you're using with LLMs are not training on your data. If you're worried about proprietary data leaking out to the world, and go for it. Use AI because nobody's building teams of lawyers to come after you because you're using a generative text generator.
One very, very cautious thing that, because there's no copyright, like they can't copyright anything AI generated. Just know that if you create something like 90% AI based audio, video, you will, if your competitor copies it pretty much exactly as is, but just replaces it, say with ideogram, like the lettering from your logo to their logo, right now you don't have anything to stand on. Like there is no law protecting, that is exactly my app. Like, nope, you made it. So that is something that you do have to be aware of if you're going to be using like, I'm just going to generate a whole bunch of ads and one pops. Doesn't stop anybody else from saying, well, I'm just going to use that and just replace that. And there will be a company that will do something like that.
So my comment is gonna be aligned with Elon Musk's opinion on this matter, specifically patents. He doesn't believe in patents. He thinks they're stupid and they're just everything should be available. It's really about the best person. It's all about your ability to go to market. So if what Carl just says, I created something with AI, my competitor copies it, I have no recourse. You're right, but I'm better at going to market than they am. I'm gonna lean on my ability to go to market with this product better and execute better and customer service better. So I think that I would say go balls to the wall. You know, don't worry about all the legal implications, because right now it's the Wild West. There'll be plenty of time for laws that you have to shackle you in 2 years, but go crazy now while you can.
That is a lot of imagery.
You're welcome.
My thoughts are, number one, if you're really concerned about it, consult a lawyer. And number two, if you're really concerned about it and the lawyer says don't do it, build your own in-house system. Now, that's probably going to be more suitable for larger companies, but that kind of technology is becoming easier and easier to get for small businesses and even one-man and one-woman bands. So, you know, at the end of the day, you have options.
I'm going to say have a strategy for being, think about a strategy for why someone copying you is a great idea, right? Like flip it on its head. Be a recognizable brand. Be such a good customer service that like they can get it everywhere, but they totally want to get it from you, right? Those kinds of things.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd say take a look at your business and see what your moat really is. And if copyright isn't part of that, you're good to go.
Well, I think that'll pretty much wrap it up for today and for this week. It's been a great week. Covered a lot of topics. Don't forget, guys, if you're not catching us live, you can always catch us on Spotify. You can catch us on YouTube. You can catch us. You can catch clips on TikTok. We're all over. So come and see us. Come watch the replays if you like. Leave comments on those replays as well. We monitor those, and we're always happy to bring those up into new comments and conversations as well. So until then, we'll be back next week with a whole set of new topics that have not been decided yet, but I'm sure they'll be amazing. And we'll come back at it. So this has been the Daily AI Show. I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend.
Happy Friday, everybody.